War clouds are gathering in the Middle East. All signs point to the U.S. military significantly escalating the scale of the war. So what's going on? Also, the Houthis attacked 2 oil tankers. How did they suddenly get the nerve to do that? What will happen in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait? And what's the reason behind all of this? And another thing, the Save America Act has reached its final showdown. Republicans are trying everything they can. What does that include? Welcome to Good Morning America with Fang Wei. Hello to our YouTube viewers and our listeners on Sound of Hope Silicon Valley, FM 96.1. All right, let's get straight to the point. Wow. First, U.S. Central Command confirmed airstrikes for the 12th consecutive day. In this 12th strike, they used a B-1B bomber for the first time, commonly known as the Lancer. This is a very significant move. We'll talk more about it later. As you can see, this is the B-1 bomber. Meanwhile, the U.S. is also heavily reinforcing its troops near Iran. 3 main points are very telling. First, a large number of special forces have arrived at U.S. bases in the Middle East. Second, more bomber squadrons are being deployed. This includes the B-1 bombers taking off from the UK and those from the U.S., all on high alert. The B-1BL Lancer is a top-tier U.S. bomber. What does that mean? It's known for being high speed and long range. Most importantly, it's a heavy bomber, very heavy. It has a payload of 34 tons. To put that in perspective, the B-2 stealth bomber used against Iranian nuclear facilities last June has a payload of 18 tons. So one B-1 Lancer carries as much as 2 B-2s. However, it doesn't carry nuclear weapons. While the B-2 can, the B-1 is strictly non-nuclear. Its primary role is using conventional bombs to support ground operations. Now, the third and most prominent U.S. move is the massive increase in field medical personnel. Over 150 medical staff have arrived at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. This is a military hospital and the primary treatment center for U.S. casualties from the Middle East. This leads to speculation that the conflict will go beyond airstrikes and escalate into ground operations, like a landing. That's why they're prepping the hospital for casualties. Also, the U.S. Navy already has 17 ships in the region, including 2 carrier strike groups, 11 destroyers, and a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Given this, air power is sufficient, so why keep sending more troops? It's clearly another sign of impending ground combat. So what are the reasons for this escalation? Let me summarize. First, Iran clearly can't be trusted. No matter what MOU is signed, how well talks go, or what emergency mechanisms are in place, Iran will still attack merchant ships to block traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. So President Trump has clearly learned his lesson or run out of patience. This time the goal is to fight Iran until they surrender, not just until they negotiate. Of course, he's still open to talks or interested in them, but he wants to fight until Iran is true, in a state of half surrender and half negotiation. Second, Iran's attacks have killed American soldiers. President Trump went to Dover Air Force Base yesterday to receive the remains of the fallen U.S. service members. So at the same time, President Trump gave the order yesterday to take the gloves off and, quote, give them hell. Third, regarding those nuclear facilities in the mountains of Iran, President Trump has already said we're going after them. We'll blow those nuclear facilities up. Therefore, we'll need to deploy troops and generals. Fourth, the Houthis have opened fire in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, attempting to blockade it. The good news for President Trump is that Congress approved funding yesterday. It wasn't the entire Congress, but the House, which passed a $95 billion funding framework by a vote of 216 to 214. $73 billion is for military and intelligence, with $60 billion specifically for a war between the U.S. and Iran. So it means plenty of ammo and supplies because the funding is there. This bill passed the House by just a 1-vote margin, 216 to 214. If one vote had flipped, it wouldn't have passed. So here's my Fang Wei commentary. Johnson is truly impressive. His execution is incredible, repeatedly pulling off the nearly impossible. I say this because you have to coordinate over 200 people in the House, nearly 220. And to repeatedly get a 99-to-1 ratio within a Republican Party of free-willed individuals to pass it within the Republican caucus is something else. Sure, you might say Democrats often vote 100-0, but that's because the Democratic Party has changed. They have very strict party discipline, where members basically just vote however the party decides. But the Republican Party hasn't changed. The GOP is still a traditional party. What's a traditional party? It means members have free will and independent minds. Most importantly, they only answer to their own constituents. They respect the party, but they don't have to obey it. So to get them to vote in lockstep, you have to persuade them. So achieving a 99-to-1 ratio is truly incredible. We've seen Johnson do this time and time again. There's another bill today I'll tell you about later. Also, Trump has been posting on X and Truth Social messaging Iran. What did he say? He said from now on, if Iran fires on ships in the Strait of Hormuz, no matter what you use, whether it's missiles, rockets, drones, or any other weapon, the United States will destroy a bridge or a power plant, including facilities near or inside the capital, Tehran. His point is to make it a simple formula, so Iran learns the consequences of attacking ships. You hit one ship, and it's the same as losing one of your own bridges or one of your own power plants. It's just to conduct a training exercise, a so-called deterrence training. At the same time, besides what happened before, the Middle East is truly covered in clouds of war. How so? Israel's public broadcaster, KAN, reported that Israel received notice from Washington and has entered its highest state of military alert. This notice says the U.S. military is significantly expanding military operations against Iran. The IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Zamir, is already in Tel Aviv, which is Israel's capital. An emergency meeting of the entire general staff was held at the Kiryat in Tel Aviv. The discussion focused on air defense readiness and preparing for a potential large-scale, multi-front missile counterattack by Iran. Then the mayor of Ramat Gan in Israel announced that all shelters in the city have been opened. The risk of an Iranian missile attack over the weekend has increased significantly. Meanwhile, the U.S. military has completely evacuated Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. This is a base for the U.S. Fifth Fleet. This all means something big is about to happen. Okay, another thing is that dozens of KC-135 and KC-46 aerial refueling tankers are being redeployed to Israel and the surrounding areas to support sustained long-range strike missions. What does aerial refueling mean? It means planes don't have to return. They can keep flying and flying in the air to continuously carry out combat missions. All these signs indicate that U.S. military action against Iran will escalate significantly. So it's very likely to start over the weekend. Therefore, we'll wait with bated breath. Speaking of which, please stay tuned to Fangway Time. Whenever there's breaking news, Fangway will provide the latest reports and subsequent analysis immediately. For new viewers unfamiliar with the Fangway Time channel, just remember this is about the latest news on the U.S. and the analysis behind it. You can subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss notifications from Fangway Time. Next, the Houthis announced on Monday a naval blockade against Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea and issued warnings to passing vessels via radio. Then on Wednesday, they took action, attacking 2 Saudi tankers in the Red Sea. One is the Insyria and the other is the Lila. Among them, the Insyria was confirmed to have been hit by a missile on its starboard side and caught fire. Fortunately, there were no casualties. As for the other ship, the Lila, the Houthis claim to have hit it, but there's no official confirmation yet that it was actually struck. Well, regarding the Houthis, I've always said they wouldn't dare start a war lightly because it would invite disaster, as they'd face a joint strike from the U.S. and Saudi Arabia because they threaten Saudi oil transport routes in the Red Sea. Now, it seems I have to say I was wrong, but there's a reason for that. Secretary of State Rubio said Iran is now airlifting IRGC troops directly from Tehran to Yemen to challenge the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. In other words, the Houthis can't do it themselves, or won't do it, so Iran is sending people directly to do it. Now, Rubio is currently in Southeast Asia at the ASEAN Summit in Manila, Philippines. He spoke about this issue there, saying that any action to restrict shipping in the Red Sea would create the same problems as in the Strait of Hormuz. We are monitoring this closely. The Saudi military has vowed to protect the openness of the Bab al-Mandeb Strait and has responded to Houthi threats against vessels in this lane, saying we will definitely provide a firm response. I've introduced the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to you many times. It connects to the Red Sea to the north and the Gulf of Aden to the south, right? It's the main shipping corridor for the Suez Canal connecting Europe and Asia. Usually, as you can see, what's being targeted is this. Yes, this is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And then, in this area, 12% of global trade and 1/4 of the world's containers pass through here. Also, very crucially, 7% of the world's crude oil also goes through this strait. Rubio said if we set a precedent in the Middle East where a country can decide to control international waterways and even, collect tolls, if you don't pay, I'll blow up your ship, we'd be creating a very dangerous precedent that would be repeated in other parts of the world. Including this place, referring to the Strait of Malacca or elsewhere, it would just repeat. Okay, so Rubio said the Houthis, Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, and Hamas, these are the places where Iran spends its money. They don't spend the money on their people. Instead, they use it to support these terrorist organizations and destabilizing forces everywhere. Now, I should add one thing. Besides that, they also spend it elsewhere, on themselves, on the luxury mansions and assets they have hidden overseas. Okay, so Trump also spoke up. Trump posted a tweet today saying that a year ago, because the Houthis fired on ships passing through the Red Sea, interfering with commerce and trade, the United States launched a powerful strike against them. Since then, and during our conflict with Iran, the Houthi rebels have acted quite responsibly. Unfortunately, they've started again, firing on 2 Saudi Arabian vessels last night. I'm stating here that if they dare to do this again, the United States will hold Iran accountable because the Houthi rebels are Iran's proxies or proxy forces. Both Iran and the Houthi rebels themselves will face significant military punishment. Of course, I'm very disappointed in the Houthi rebels themselves because until now, they had been acting quite professionally and rationally. What does this mean? Let me explain. For President Trump, analyze it. First, it's a carrot and stick approach. For the Houthis, it's like a pat on the head followed by a rap on the knuckles. Second, it's a dual warning, warning both the Houthis and Iran, saying, hey, if you block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, I'll strike both Iran and the Houthis. So both the master and the servant, you'd better be careful and stop right there. Now we'll see if the Houthis understand if Trump can actually use this one tweet to, win without fighting. Okay. Also, Secretary of State Rubio said, I hope the Houthis stop their actions. They really shouldn't be doing this. They were sucked in by the Iranians, tricked into it by the Iranians. The Houthis have been quite smart for most of the conflict. They've been staying out of it, but now they've clearly been tricked into attacking Saudi Arabian vessels. Well, we'll see. This is Iran obviously wanting to open a second front in the Middle East. And what will the U.S. do? And can they even pull it off? What will happen if they do? Because if the Houthis really block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the war will escalate quickly. Why? As you know, the U.S. has always fought Iran with airstrikes, right? No ground troops. Gulf countries won't send ground troops. And the U.S. doesn't want to risk sending them either. But if the Houthis do this, if they block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, they're directly hitting Saudi Arabia. Because we all know 7 million barrels of crude oil a day are sent through Saudi's oil pipeline to Yanbu port on the Red Sea coast, then shipped north through the Suez Canal to Europe, and south through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to Asia. It's all Saudi business. And Saudi Arabia borders the Houthis to the north. So if the Houthis do this, the Saudi army would charge in with the support of the U.S. military. So it's an extremely risky move for the Houthis. At the same time, it's an escalation of the Middle East conflict. But maybe for the U.S., they feel taking this chance to remove this cancer isn't a bad thing with the Saudi ground troops. So we'll see how this plays out. Also, I told you yesterday that Saudi Arabia and the U.S. signed a nuclear power plant agreement for 30 years, costing tens of billions of dollars. The U.S. helped Saudi build nuclear plants so they can sell their oil for profit and use that money for nuclear power. President Trump tweeted today, it's very interesting. What did he say? He said, our Department of Energy is negotiating a civilian nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia, limited to non-military use, similar to our existing facilities with Iran and the UAE. This deal will be approved, but, and here's the but, it's entirely contingent on Saudi Arabia joining the highly respected and very successful Abraham Accords. So Trump is determined to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords. Since Saudi Arabia is the big brother of the Gulf states, if they join, the others will likely follow. But Saudi Arabia has been saying, if you don't settle the Palestine issue, I'm not joining. So Trump is using every opportunity to get Saudi Arabia on board to sign the Abraham Accords, to create, that is, to work with Israel to create peace and prosperity in the Middle East. All right, so this involves all Middle Eastern oil. Just a reminder, I just updated a video called The Historical Evolution of American Oil Companies on the Fang Wei Finance channel. Besides that, I've updated two more. One is the AT&T monopoly story, which covers decades of monopoly history. And the other is the alliance between Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Did you know about that? Fang Wei Finance releases 3 programs every week, and I think they're all very substantial. These financial stories involve personal finance, as well as stories about American companies, and also involve, business-related knowledge. They're mostly story-based, so I think they're well worth watching. How do you find this channel? It's very simple. Just search for Fang Wei Finance, and that's it. So yeah, I hope you'll all like that channel too. It's Fang Wei's second channel. Now let me talk about the situation with the Save America Act. All right, so basically there are 2 bills below that the House just passed, so I'd call it swift and decisive action. The House passed the defense budget bill first. What happened was on yesterday, the U.S. House passed it with a slim margin of 216 to 212. That's just a 2-vote difference. If those 2 votes had gone to the other side, it would have been 214 to 214, and it would have failed. By just 2 votes, they passed the $1.15 trillion fiscal year 2027 National Defense Authorization Act. Simply put, it's the defense bill, the defense budget. Now, although the bill successfully cleared the House, the bipartisan reaction to it has been extremely polarized. So this bill might face challenges in the Senate and might not pass there. I'll explain why in a bit. First, I have to say Johnson is really impressive. I just told you he passed a special appropriation by 1 vote. Now, this National Defense Authorization Act passed by 2 votes. Speaker Johnson stated that in an increasingly dangerous world, we're reminded of President Reagan's warning. Freedom is not innate. It must be fought for and protected so the next generation can enjoy it. He said as elected representatives, protecting our freedom and defense capabilities is one of our most fundamental duties. All right, so what's in this bill? Let me tell you. As you know, when Trump took office in 2016, the defense budget was only $500 billion. This time, it's reached $1 trillion, $150 billion. So in this, there's over $60 billion for the construction and support of the 4th Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine, and then 2 more Virginia-class nuclear submarines, and 2 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers. Additionally, several of President Trump's defense plans will be codified into law to ensure their implementation. This includes a very important one that affects every one of us in America, called the Golden Dome system for protecting the U.S. mainland, called Golden Dawn. Furthermore, the bill specifically mentions increasing investment in innovative technology, including hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, automated systems, autonomous systems, as well as cyberspace technology, mobile micronuclear reactors, and high-energy laser weapons. These fields are crucial for future confrontations with the CCP. The bill also includes a provision called the GUARD Act, proposed by the chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, Molnar. What is it? It requires the Department of Defense to start a process to evaluate whether to ban Chinese-made robots nationwide in the U.S. and to prevent the CCP from further infiltrating the U.S. defense industry. It explicitly prohibits the military from purchasing photovoltaic cells, modules, and inverters from the CCP, and strictly forbids Chinese-made connected vehicles from entering U.S. military bases. Okay, it also calls for It's about replacing printed circuit boards made in China and reducing the supply of key materials like rare earths from China. Okay, let's think about this bill. It passed the House, so should it pass the Senate? Of course it should. Why? Because for the past 65 years, the National Defense Authorization Act, which in plain terms is the defense budget, has always been seen by both parties as a must-pass annual bill. You can block anything but this because it involves national security, which both parties care about. But this time it's tricky. Why? Two reasons. First, the sheer scale of military spending, the funding for the Iran war and aid for Israel and Ukraine have caused partisan divides. Second, and more importantly, House Republicans, specifically Johnson, bundled the Save America Act into it. As a result, in the House, because of the first point, the scale of military spending in the Iran war, with differing views, 7 Republicans actually defected. And of course, he won 6 Democratic votes. In the past, he'd win dozens of Democratic votes, but now only 6. So it passed by a very narrow margin, only by 2 votes. Normally, it should pass by dozens. Well, the point is, regardless, Johnson got it done. 216 to 212, right? He made it happen. Though it was close, this bill will be tough in the Senate because it'll definitely face a filibuster. He needs 60 votes, and with the Save American Act tied in, getting 60 votes is almost impossible. So President Trump called again yesterday to abolish the filibuster. He even said something quite shocking. He said, "If you don't abolish it, in a few years, you'll see me crying at home after I leave office." He said, "Do you want to see me cry? What am I crying about? I'm crying because you didn't listen to me and didn't abolish the filibuster. Because if you don't," he said, "the Democrats will do it immediately once they're in power, and the whole country will tilt completely." So he asked everyone on the spot to call John Thune. He said, "Everyone call John Thune," urging him to pass the Save America Act as soon as possible. Well, this is what I've been telling you. The Save America Act is at its final hurdle. If it doesn't pass in August, there basically won't be any time left. So for those who care about this, I'll say it again. This isn't a Republican bill, it's an American bill. It's important to both parties, to any political party, and to this country. It's a matter of basic integrity, not a political issue. Although one party is pushing it and another is blocking it, essentially it's not a partisan issue. Am I wrong? Right? So I'm reminding all of our viewers, if you have time, not only write or call your senators every day, but also call John Thune. Because he's the Senate Majority Leader, it makes sense for anyone to call him. It's not like he'll say, "Are you from South Dakota? If not, I won't take your call." That won't happen. That's the situation, okay? Now, as for how to find your senator's phone number and contact info, I've posted it in my community. If you don't know, you can go check it out. All right, next, let's take a look at this other thing, the $95 billion I mentioned before. Let me give you more details. So this passed on Tuesday with a vote of 216 to 214. What exactly is this budget resolution for $95 billion in spending? And why this bill is different from the National Defense Authorization Act? It will pass. It's very likely to pass. Why? Well, first, the resolution covers 3 areas. One is defense spending and intelligence systems. Second is farmer subsidies. And third is the SAVE Act. You might ask, how can the SAVE Act be tied to this? See that? For every bill, this guy Johnson tries to attach it. How does he do it? It's completely different. Listen to me. First is military spending. The biggest expenditure is money not needed for current wars. Hegseth specifically went to the Senate and said, "We've already used $37.5 billion. We need more money. We need $60 billion. The war in the Middle East needs money to continue, right? So this bill gives Hegseth $60 billion. At the same time, another $13 billion is specifically for supporting U.S. intelligence agencies. Okay, that's the first point, the first category, which adds up to $73 billion. Then, for agriculture, it provides $12 billion in aid to American farmers to help protect the interests of those affected by tariffs. Third is election security. It will allocate $10 billion to support states in implementing the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or the SAVE Act. You might say, what's this about? The SAVE Act requires states to provide proof of U.S. citizenship, to verify citizenship, and to require a photo ID when voting, right? Okay, so what does that mean? First of all, I say this bill will pass. Why? Because it's a type of reconciliation bill called the reconciliation process. I've explained this before. A reconciliation bill means it can pass with a simple majority. But the condition is that it can only involve matters related to money. Because the SAVE Act has nothing to do with money, right? You're saying that providing proof of citizenship during voter registration and showing a photo ID when voting has nothing to do with money. So how can it be tied to this? Well, this is the move Johnson made. He said, we'll allocate $10 billion. If states comply, we'll give you a portion of that $10 billion as a reward. If you don't, we won't give you the reward. Because of this, it becomes related to money. And because it's related, it gets tucked into what we just called the reconciliation bill. But he's saying if you don't do it, you don't get the money. He's not saying I'm requiring you to do it. The Real Save Act is something you have to do. That's the law passed by Congress. If that can't be achieved, it becomes we're allocating $10 billion to use money to entice you to do it. So because it's a type of reconciliation bill, it only needs 51 votes. Since excluding Vance, it only needs 50 votes. So it's very likely to pass, though it's not guaranteed. But the chances are at least better than the absolute certainty of failing to get 60 votes. So you see? Now Johnson is trying every possible angle he can, right? Do you think it's possible that allocating $10 billion could entice these blue states to give up on implementing the American Rescue Plan? The chances are very slim, very slim. But regardless, they're exploring every possible option. That's what I'm trying to say. My interpretation for you is that they're considering every possible way in this final month.